Today I'll be discussing with you all about the crisis of water quality and water quantity in South Africa. This is not just a localized or a regional crisis within the country, it's actually a full problem throughout the entire country. My name is Mandy Chapman, and I really enjoyed working on this presentation and this project and this national issue because I actually went to South Africa in May, spent a month there, so a lot of these pictures are going to be from my trip, so if you have any questions, just, email me and let me know. So kind of to help understand why South Africa as a country is having issues with allocation of water and also water resources, I'm going to kind of give a brief background on the demographics of South Africa. It is 2 times as big as Texas. It has a population of an estimated 55 million people, and of course it's located on the southern tip of Africa. The climate is varied, and that's dependent upon the topography. In the mainland it is semi-arid. On the eastern coast it's mainly subtropical. Overall, the average type of climate of South Africa is going to be a temperate climate. And due to the variation of topography, the oceans, all that good stuff, the range throughout South Africa as a country is up in the northwest. You're going to have a more desert climate, more dry heat. But then on the eastern seaboard, you're going to have a more subtropical. And the winter is actually during June to August. The topography of South Africa is also variable. In the interior, it is vast and flat. The south and the west sides are scrublands. The north, it's drier, and in the northwest is actually where the Kalahari Desert is located. Mid-eastern is where you're going to find most of your water areas and water catchment areas and everything like that, and this is also the location of most of the agriculture within South Africa. The northeast coast is going to be hot and dry, and the southwest, which is mainly the Cape Peninsula, has a very Mediterranean climate, and this is where the most rainfall in South Africa happens. The economy of South Africa is based upon pretty much 3 separate entities. 1 is tourism, 2 is agriculture, and 3 is mining. Tourism is one of their biggest imports, basically. I mean, you could consider tourism as an import because people are coming and, providing for them. But, they just get to benefit from it. Some of the main faces of tourism in South Africa are going to be Kruger National Park and coastal regions like Cape Town, if you're a big surfer, anything like that. Agricultural industry, it only accounts for 10% of formal employment in South Africa, and it doesn't even have that great of a GDP. It's only about 2.6%. Only 13.5% of land in South Africa can actually be used for agricultural purposes due to such an arid climate. And only 3% of those lands are actually potential, really high quality lands. So, of course, a lot of fertilizer, a lot of irrigation, all that stuff is going to be necessary for the other percentage of lands that they're trying to use for farming. The main crops are going to be sugar, corn, and then for mining wise it's going to be diamonds. They still consider that a crop. South Africa is the continent of Africa's largest producer of corn. There's also the issue about land usage. There's 3 types of land use. There's arable land, which is crops that are replanted after every harvest. There's permanent land, which is not replanted, but it does not include timber land, like land that actually has already had timbering and everything going on. And then there's other land, which is, buildings, cities, everything like that, just land that's not basically usable because we've developed it as humans. So there are many factors that have led to the 2015 water crisis that we're seeing now in South Africa. One of them was a recent change in government. Apartheid ruling was between the years of 1948 and 1994. This was based on the idea of radical racial segregation. The Native Africans were actually the ones being segregated by the Dutch, the French, the British, that had over the years came in, conquered certain areas and stayed there to help the Africans. It was an all-white government. A lot of issues came about with this apartheid ruling. Nelson Mandela, you've heard of him, hopefully. He was actually part of the revolution that helped end apartheid in South Africa. When apartheid did end, there were some consequences. One major one is the fact that 14 million people were left without access to clean or any water supply. 21 million people, which was half the population at the time, were left without access to sanitation. Now, in 2008, these numbers have changed drastically. 2008, only 5 million people were without access to clean water, and only 15 million people were without access to sanitation. Another bad thing that apartheid did was, during the rule, they cut off any inter-country communications. There was no speaking to Zimbabwe, Mozambique, anything like that, which, like in our states, we have to have interstate commerce going on. We have to have interstate communication going on. And this really, really hurt South Africa. One of the biggest reasons that it hurt was right now, especially with the crisis of water, no flow, low quantity and everything like that, Zimbabwe has had severe pollution issues up in their country. And now the rivers that are flowing cannot dilute the cholera that is actually in the waters. And so now that's flowing into South Africa, and it is just costing people health and lives and everything like that. Another issue, probably the main issue that has led to this water crisis, is the fact of global climate change. Right now, South Africa is experiencing the worst drought since 1992. This is the fourth consecutive drought year. And in this year, in early 2015, the drought started, and this was due to El Nino, which also affects California, India, all those countries. Well, California state, but whatever. And right now, in November, South Africa is actually going to be experiencing 4 more months of drought. And this right now is their summertime, or their springtime. So if the drought continues, they're not going to get rainfall when they actually should be. According to the World Economic Forum, droughts in this century are going to be more reoccurrent and more severe, and have been thus far, than any other previous millennia. It is the 30th driest nation. However, most of the natives and most of the citizens there are planned for, maybe a drought once or twice consecutively. But 4 years consecutively, that's going to take a toll on any resource that they have. Dams have been cut by 12% on average throughout the entire country. For last May, in 2014, almost all the dams were about 90.1% full. However, now, in May 2015, dams are only 79.2% full. Another problem that global climate change is affecting is agricultural usage and the availability of water for crops and livestock. With this problem, dealing with farmlands and farmers, the actual biggest problem is going to be for Africa as a continent, because South Africa provides the corn for the entire continent of Africa. On an individual scale, for the farmers, money is going to be the biggest issue. Right now they're asking banks to lend them money, and there are certain banks and certain lenders that will. But right now, I think in total, 8.98 billion rand are going to loan towards the farmers. Now, some of the banks aren't okay with this because they see it as a losing investment. They don't plan on ever getting this money back because they're not sure if the farmers can ever pay it back. But the problem is that for the banks, it's not really in the overall picture of the amount of money that they lend and the amount of money that they have. It's not really a big deal. It's only 1.75% of their total credit, but to banks it's still a loss, so they have a problem with it. Also for farmers, they are the first, along with consumers, to take the water cuts. So water will be allocated elsewhere and be reduced in the agricultural section. This is going to be a problem because there's not going to be any crops from the farmers being exported and thus making South Africa money. Also, there's not going to be any food security. They're not going to have anything to rely back on if, everything starts going wrong in the country. And without food actually from the country to take to stores and provide for others, they're going to have to start importing food, which is going to cause the price on food to increase within the country. Major social problems will occur without both rain and no agriculture. It's going to be a massive amount of job loss, not only in the agricultural section, but it's a trickle-down effect. The agricultural section is going to affect others, small stores that rely on the farmers to provide them with produce to sell. They're going to go out of business, and then poverty is going to increase. Also, without a constant food supply, there's going to be an increased demand for food that South Africa is going to have to get from elsewhere. Another factor that is a problem is this population drift that's happening. Right now, there's a change from the old age of living, which is a more rural livelihood, to the more new, modern age of living, which is moving to cities. During the apartheid ruling, when Native Africans were segregated, this is probably some of the very first times after they've gotten situated since 1994 where they can actually afford to move out of their segregated areas. So for them, a lot of these new cities and these more modern ideas are brand new. The reasons for this shift are mainly because of more job opportunities. There is more goods and services available locally in a city than there are out in the country, and also better education for their children. However, this rapid shift does have its downfalls. The first problem is that half of the urban population now lives in informal settlements that are basically tent cities. These areas, these tent cities, have a major increase in waterborne disease due to no or little wastewater management. According to the South Africa Human Rights Commission, 23 municipalities out of all the municipalities in South Africa, it's about 9%, is in a crisis state with an acute risk of a disease outbreak. 38% of them have the potential to deteriorate. The criteria in which South Africa bases their water quality on is called the Blue Drop certification, which is what I'll go into later. But the Blue Drop certification and the South Africa Human Rights Commission found that 98 municipal systems out of 931 and 153 municipalities actually passed the water quality standards for the country. It's not very good. Another research, more research was done on this population shift, and this was from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. They said that with this population increase into cities, there's going to be a need for economic growth, and with a drought and lack of supplies, lack of water and everything like that, things are going to have to shut down, allocations of water are going to be changed. So this increase in population is going to put a strain on the water resources of South Africa. Only 8% of all the country's land is actually providing 50% of the country's water. So what this is saying is that out of the entire country, only 8% of surface water is actually used to provide only half of the water necessary for livelihoods in South Africa. Some areas have already had to start restricting power and energy to certain areas. However, some provinces now are having to take initiative to start restricting water usage. And this can range from days at a time, certain times in a day, weeks, anything like that. They just don't have the resources to provide for the citizens. And they said that in higher elevations, the individuals will be suffering the most because when the majority of a city or a majority of an area is asleep during the nighttime, these individuals in higher elevations aren't going to have access to water because it'll be shut off. Next to the problem with global climate change, infrastructure malfunction is probably the biggest issue regarding the amount of water that is available in South Africa. Excuse me. Surprisingly, South Africa has one of the cleanest water systems in the world. However, it is not efficient enough to provide for the entire general public. The problems regarding just overall infrastructure issues are dams. Most of the dam projects have failed or are on an indefinite backlog due to the recent government change, lack of education, lack of money, all that. Drinking water systems, this includes both municipal and private. The reserves are low, dams are low. The municipal systems are either polluted or contaminated. Groundwater is contaminated. And surface water is contaminated. All this contamination, not only is it going to affect the humans, but it's going to affect the wildlife. And wildlife is going to be very sensitive due to the fact that raw sewage is just going straight into these river systems. For example, the Vaal River, which is one of the major transport rivers in South Africa, has such a high fecal pollution amount that in certain areas it is advised not to touch, not to consume or anything like that because it can actually cause open wounds to occur on your body. Wastewater systems are the biggest issue in South Africa. Out of 824 plants in South Africa overall, half of them are in critical condition. 98% of available water in South Africa has been used up by some studies, and later on I'll explain what the Department of Water and Sanitation has to say, but for the moment 98% of it has been used up. 37% of only reported drinking water has been leaked into soil or has been lost via runoff. However, it is estimated that water that is not reported or cannot be measured, that is being lost from leaks, cuts, anything due to poor infrastructure, it is estimated that this amount of water that is lost can be anywhere between 50 to 60%. Another problem for South Africa is that their wastewater treatment plants are outdated, but their wastes now are starting to become very similar to that of more developed countries. So they have all these pollutants, but they don't have the resource available to filter them out. And only 5% of waste that can contaminate water's sources is actually dumped in appropriate areas. As of January 2010, only 40% of water service authorities actually were trained or had licenses or permits. So 60% of individuals that were supposed to be taking care of these wastewater treatment plants had never even been trained in this field before. Out of this 40% that have the license and the education and the training, only a third of them say that they check, only a third of them, a third of them have admitted to not even checking the water quality of their systems on a monthly basis. And out of the 2/3 that actually do check, only 1 in 5 actually use a lab analysis. Most of them just base it on color or, maybe taste or anything like that. So just the simple fact that there's not a formal way to test is a problem. Also, other problems regarding the wastewater systems are that there is no budget from the government to deal with these types of situations. All the upgrades that the Department of Water and Sanitation want to do on these infrastructures had to be on hold because the government's not giving the money and they can't find the money anywhere. So what are they going to do? Right now, it seems that out of the water ideas and the water schemes that the DWS has proposed, 30% of them have deficient budgets, and 15% of these schemes are predicted to fail in the next 5 years. So that does not sound good. The last topic I want to discuss in regards to the water crisis in South Africa is going to deal with mining. There are three main types: diamonds, gold, coal. Gold and coal are the most devastating to the environment in South Africa. There is vast mine drainage issues in South Africa, and in their water system, sulfuric acid is actually formed from the mine's runoff, and this goes directly into the water. The sulfuric acid changes the pH from a neutral or a healthy pH to a more acidic pH of 2 or 3. With the additional amounts of water and the sulfuric acid and all that, there's going to be an increase in chemical erosion on the rocks, and this is going to cause an abundance of metals to be released into the water system. These metals are going to be copper, arsenic, aluminum, and this is just going to cause more issues downstream when they come out of suspension. Another major, the major source of acid mine drainage isn't from the new mines, but like here in West Virginia, it's from the abandoned mines. 90% of the acid mine drainage in South Africa comes from the 6,000 abandoned mines throughout the country. Health problems with acid mine drainage can be noticed mainly in the communities of the miners. In these communities, it's already poor, it's already poverty-stricken, so they've already got it set up to where it's not going to, their health is not going to be in great shape. Within these communities, there's always going to be a constant food shortage, there's an increase in HIV, and overall lower life expectancy. Acid mine drainage has been linked to diarrhea, which is just a severe case of dehydration, and neurotoxic problems. It has been suggested that acid mine drainage exposure can increase cancer rates, decrease cognitive or brain functioning, and this can be anything from just simple memory loss or early stages of Alzheimer's, and it can possibly cause skin lesions. For a while in South Africa, new mining permits were being granted just because they were trying to clean up the rivers and the systems and everything. But all of a sudden, new mining permits are happening. Now the mines are smaller. There's an increased number of them. So therefore, there is a possibility of an increased amount of acid mine drainage from the running mines. But in a long-term effect, this increase in mines could also increase the amount of abandoned mines, which could then increase the amount of acid mine drainage later on down the road. Right now, the current ways of dealing with acid mine drainage, the Department of Water and Sanitation is the governmental agency that is in charge of mining, in charge of treating the acid mine drainage. The current process calls for 5 to 7 liters of clean water to rinse with 1 liter of acid mine drainage. However, with the drought and with the water shortage, how could they possibly clean all this acid mine drainage? It's just not possible right now. In general, the DWS is understaffed. There's always a 10% vacancy, and that's due to, there's no talent, there's no education, and there's no money to give the people that will work for them. Since there is no money, this has been an issue because the government itself is not allocating and is not budgeting money for the cleanup of these systems. In the Vaal River alone, it seems that it is necessary that 10 billion rand has to be allocated, because that's what it's going to cost to clean or even just dilute the river itself. And this 10 million rand is going to have to be over a course of 3 to 4 years. However, the government didn't include restoration, cleaning, anything of those sorts into the DWS budget for acid mine drainage or wastewater treatment or wastewater management. So right now, who's paying for cleaning up acid mine drainage? The citizens are paying. And this is from taxes, fees, fines, anything like that. And even though the idea is good, you know, you're drinking it, so you're going to help pay for it, when there is none, and everything's, what is there is polluted, and then there's no food, and these people are, you know, just so poverty-stricken as a country in a whole, who's going to be providing the money to fix and clean these river systems that have this acid mine drainage problem? So we've gone over some of the overall general situations in South Africa for the entire country that is causing this water crisis. Right now we're just going to kind of look at the more region-specific water problems. And these are both to just kind of give you an idea of where we're talking about. Right there above the Vaal River, northwest, Limpopo and all those areas, that's going to be one of the first sections that I talk about. And then where the Vaal River and the Orange River are splitting, I'm going to talk about the Orange Free State and the KwaZulu Natal, and right there I'm going to talk about them together. And then all the capes I'm going to talk about together, just so then you have an idea. So the first one is going to be the northwest part of South Africa. This includes the provinces of Northwest, Limpopo, if I'm going to butcher these, but I'm going to try, Mpumalanga, and this is where the mouth of the Vaal River starts, and Limpopo and Mpumalanga is where Kruger National Park is, and Gauteng, and this includes the capital of South Africa, Pretoria, and the major city of Johannesburg. The problems within this little region that I selected is Gauteng. The water supplier there, the municipal water supplier, is called Rand Water. It provides water to Johannesburg and just the entire province of Gauteng. However, due to the drought, there's been a strain on the bulk water supply, and Johannesburg cities, additional cities, have just not been able to get the amount of water that they need. Right now, Rand Water as an entity is advising restricted water usage. They're not implementing it, but they are talking to the citizens and the consumers, hey, you should probably go ahead and hold off on that. Pretoria is also having water shortages. Right now, it's been at most 4 days of consecutive cutbacks. In place of water in their homes, people are going to communal pools with buckets, and families and citizens, hundreds at a time, are just queuing there to just get a bucket of water to take home to provide for themselves. So it's starting to get pretty bad in South Africa. Mpumalanga has an increase in acid mine drainage, and these problems aren't just in one stream or one river, it's in the entire watershed of the Olifants River. The major increase in coal licenses being issued in this area is causing an excessive amount of water to use for the coal, but also with the coal mines using this water, it's not going to the public. So on October 28, 2015, this province did a province-wide restriction that as the citizen you cannot water or use sprinklers at all for your lawns and gardens. And in the Northwest province, the water reserves are down about 14.6%. On the eastern side of the country, the region that I selected is going to be in the areas of north of the Orange River, south of the Vaal River, and it's going to border the Indian Ocean. The provinces here are going to be the Eastern Transvaal, the Orange Free State, and the KwaZulu Natal, which is the KZN, and this is where the city of Durban is located. Problems when the KZN, right now, one of the biggest problems is that this province provides the most sugar for South Africa, and it's a very high tourist trap area. But all their water reserves are being deplenished. They are down as low as 17.5%. And this province actually throughout this province is the worst affected by the drought throughout the entire country. In Limbe district, there's no running water, and it's been like this, and it's up to 3 days without running water in certain families' homes. Due to the drought, there's a 50% supply restriction. The entire district went from allocating 17 million liters of water a day to now only about 9 million liters of water a day. Within this district, the water system can't just turn off and turn itself back on because the infrastructure is so outdated. So what they have to do is they just have to say, hey, we're just not going to give you guys enough. And within the province itself that's not getting enough water, people are making decisions on who's getting what when. So that's what's going on there. Residents will have water access and others won't. And those that are living in higher elevations, they're just not going to have access to it. And that's just really wrong, but there's nothing that the province can actually do. In the Hariguala district, the water is supplied by the Exomo Dam. This dam's water quantity has reduced by 30%. The production of water has reduced from 2.8 million liters of water a day to 2.5. They have decided that they were going to discuss with the upstream farmers about releasing their personal dams to provide for the general public. But then they realized even without rain, eventually the dammed water is going to run out and the situation is just going to occur. So they're having that issue too. Durban, main city of Durban in this province, is having low water quantities within the province due to, the dams being low. Another problem in Durban is the fact that the water is being stolen. 35% of the city's water is either given or taken by illegal connections. And this is a major problem because that's water that the public could be using, but it's being taken elsewhere. So that is a huge problem in Durban. Since Durban is one of the peak tourist attractions in South Africa, when the holiday season of 2015 occurred and this water crisis was happening, they basically said, hey, both tourists and natives, we're going to have to ask you, please restrict your water usage. They didn't demand it and they didn't, put it into regulations, but they simply asked people, hey, this is what the problem is. We need you all to just reduce your amount. And I'm guessing that's because they didn't want to detract tourists. And over in the Orange Free State, their reserves are down by 10.7%. On the southwest section of South Africa, this is going to include the northern, the western, and the eastern Cape. The Western Cape is where Cape Town is located. The problems within this region are that the Western Cape has an increase in E. coli bacteria. However, the Eastern Cape also has the E. coli contamination problem, and they've decided that it's probably due to either industrial or, animal or human waste contamination. But this province has had many issues because, overall, it's just not, compared to the Western Cape, it is impoverished, so there's not a lot of room for sanitation there. So this province has issued a boil alert throughout the entire area. The drought has caused water systems to be so low and so contaminated, the water can't be flushed into wastewater treatments. Economically, like I said, the province is very impoverished, and therefore there is no modern sanitation systems available. Right now, what they're using is called a pit latrine. What it is that there's sewage in a hole that has been dumped there, or everybody's outhouse is connected to it. And to control the smell, there's a shaft made alongside the hole to aerate it. Well, this can either just be dug, which can cause breakage in the soil and cause proliferation of the sewage water into groundwater. But just in general, having the sewage that is made of anything, that is liquid sewage, just sitting there in a hole, it's eventually going to reach other water sources. This area cannot afford wastewater management treatment centers, thus these latrines are leaking and they're contaminating the water in the surrounding areas. So, the government involvement. Who exactly is in charge of addressing this issue? The Department of Water and Sanitation is in charge of water policy. They've attempted to merge different countries' water standards together to form their own. And this is going to be used in wastewater treatment and drinking water and all that good stuff. Their quality standards is called the Blue Drop certification, and this is the benchmark for international standards for monitoring water quality. However, they're having an issue because their goal and objective is to ensure that no resident goes without water. Well, in times of drought, that's kind of hard to say and provide. This group is the sole group in charge of, like I said, wastewater treatment, drinking water systems, dealing with AMD, all this stuff. However, there are issues within the agency. Most people believe that they are blind to the severity of the water crisis. In a meeting, the director said that there is no immediate problem regarding theoretical water availability, that they calculated that 98% of available water is still there, and it's estimated that only 2 to 3% will be gone by 2025. They do say that there might be issues in areas where, many different sanctions are using it, like citizens, agriculture, areas like that, but those weren't the areas that they were looking for their calculations. Critics of the DWS say that they didn't take into account the actual water availability and the actual water quantities. They only use data from recorded amounts. So there's some issues regarding the governmental agency that's in charge of all this, and the people and the companies and the businesses that are dealing with this problem also. The government involvement, what is preventing the water crisis from being solved? Some of the most serious problems are that, even though South Africa has one of the best water cleaning plants in the world, it's not about the quality. It's more so about the quantity and the flow of the water that is causing this water crisis. The first is going to be that the climate change is happening. Water isn't being restored. Contaminated water isn't being pushed down into streams or through rivers. So therefore it's just sitting there, and it's like, even though there might not be enough flow in the water and everything, it's still moving, and people are still going to use it because they're going to get thirsty eventually. 18%, nearly 53 million of people right now can't access water readily, and that is a huge issue. An example of this is that the Mmenji River supplier for the KZN says that they're aware of the situation. They wish that they could help, but the problem is that without rain, nothing can help them, not even extra money, because you can't make rain with the money. So even the water companies that are providing water for these people realize the struggles that are happening. Monetary availability is another issue. It's estimated that to prevent serious water crisis in 2025, 300 billion rand is necessary. 2.9 billion rand alone is needed to work on water infrastructures. 350 million rand is needed to reduce drought problems and to create more access to groundwater and to nationally create rain capture areas. 95 million rand alone is for the cost of new water tanks and other necessary upgrades. However, even though all this money is needed and it's been estimated, the DWS isn't receiving it from the government. Right now, the DWS is estimating that since all this money is necessary, the Treasury and the government should provide. However, the Treasury of the nation only budgeted the DWS 3 billion rand for overall waste management treatment or water management treatment. Just 3 billion rand. So the government's not helping with this issue, and also there's no local budget on sanitation. It's not a priority in most provinces, so that's an issue too. The South Africa economy overall is dependent on water to fuel both the economic growth and the country itself. However, the country isn't being efficient with the supply or lack thereof. So they know that they need it, but they're not willing to be efficient and look at, new ideas of what to do. So, what has already been done in this is that the government knows that this is a collective action problem. They know that this is a governing issue that needs to be, talked about and dealt with. Also, they say that there needs to be short-term goals, but these short-term goals need to be quick and easily accessible. However, once the goal is accomplished, it can't go away. They want to set up all these little small goals to provide for the long-term goal of providing water for the citizens. And since the country wants to become more westernized and more respected in the world, they have to realize that providing for their citizens clean water and crops and food is going to be a necessity. Some of the policies already in place in the agricultural sector, there's this idea about more cost per drop, and what they're doing is they're going out there and they're saying, if you have this X amount of crops, each of these plants take this much water, this is how much water you're allowed to use per day. This is focusing on efficiency. In the Western Cape, they are allotting specific amounts of waters to trees in their areas so then they don't waste it. And also there is a water quality management strategy been set up in wastewater treatment plants throughout the country. Finally, the ideas for solving the water crisis in South Africa. One of the things is going to be looking into desalination. However, they've already said that they can't use it because it's too expensive. So one of the ideas is to look into different ways of using salt water as a freshwater source for the country. Also, they want to create large-scale infrastructure and create large-scale infrastructure. And also, like I said earlier, possibly make one entity in charge of all the water allocation in the country. Next, they want to create, implement, and continue dam and transfer projects. So they're going to have to get some money somewhere to basically build these things to help provide water for everybody. One idea was a large interbasin transfer scheme. Next is going to be the tackle the municipal system, which is, fixing the leaks and fixing the dam silting problems that are occurring. One of the ideas is to replace old water meters with smart ones. There's also going to be initiatives for citizens to change this. If you use less water, you're going to get some tax breaks. However, if you keep using a lot of water, there's going to be incremental pricing and possible fines due to, your excessive use of water. Also, billing systems will challenge areas by comparing water consumption in order to hopefully reduce the water usage. Another idea is going to be improving the agricultural industry efficiency. One of the ideas is possibly recycling the end of the growing season's water that has been ran off, and also reduce food waste to reduce demand. Next is to draw on groundwater. Another idea is to utilize current available water, minimize the waste that is being out there. So, like the food waste idea. They're going to start saying, hey, X amount of food is being wasted. This is how much food we're going to, create and sell, hopefully minimizing the waste. Also reduce the supply. If people are forced to only have a certain amount of water supplied to them, then they're not going to use it for stupid things such as, watering lawns and everything like that. And also, they want to create rainwater barrel catchment centers within provinces and within cities. So that'll be awesome. Another idea that needs to happen is going to be reforming the laws to include wasting water as a crime. Like he said, the people that want to make their lawns look nice and use sprinklers and use hoses in times of serious drought, that should be a finable offense, or, jail time should be included, because that's unnecessary use of water. They need to start revoking the laws not allowing personal rainwater catchment by private homeowners. And they need to start increasing communications between all governments within the country. So, your municipalities, the provinces, the federal government, and then, include schools and everything like that. Also, it has been noted that they need to invest in creating, preserving ecological infrastructure. Some of these ideas are, rehabilitating rivers and also rebuilding wetlands and reintroducing them into the area. And finally, South Africa believes that they need to keep the public involved in all their ideas and get, comments and suggestions from the actual public that's going to be dealing with these water regulations and laws. So overall, South Africa wants to help the public, wants to help those within their country. Just right now it's kind of difficult because a drought means no rain, and with no water coming in at all, they can't provide. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, just email me. Have a great day. Thank you.